Hello, this is Matt Harris with another episode of the Magento Association Podcast. Today I have the privilege of talking to Brent Peterson, CEO of Content Cucumber and former owner and founder of Wajento, an old veteran in the space. Welcome, Brent.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't appreciate being called old. I am only 28 years old.
Okay, gotcha.
But regardless of that, yes, I've been around the Magento community since the beginning, I guess you could say, and have enjoyed the ride so far.
Yeah. Brent was a prodigy. I think he started at 12 years old in this space.
I'm actually not at all like the Hyman brothers who started Shopware at 16, which is even more of an amazing story.
You've been obviously in the Magento space, even though you're not old. You've been in this space for a long time. So you've been through. Well, just tell me about how you got going, and might as well get into Wajento, because I'm assuming that's where you got a lot of your Magento experiences when you were running that agency.
Yeah, it started back in 2009, and I had a client. I was doing some .NET work with a custom code, and had a client who said, "Hey, I found this free platform. It's called Magento, and if you want to take a look at it, and I think we're going to go with it. And if you want to learn it, I'll pay you to learn it. Otherwise, I'm going to hire somebody else to do it." And so I took on the challenge, and I really started by looking at the existing forums that were there. This had to be in January 2009 or something like that, looking at whatever was there for forums, what was there for documentation, which was extremely new. I think it just launched in 2008. And started just diving in and asking so many questions, and then, answering lots of questions. And I answered lots of questions by using Google. And I answered and asked so many questions that by, I think, April of that year or something like that, Magento had asked me to come and help them moderate their forums because there was just so much spam on it. So I had joined their free, volunteer program to help moderate. Rhonda Rondeau, who's since passed away, but it was just a fantastic advocate for Magento at the time, helped me get started, and then Sherry Rohde later on. But it was such a unique time in the realm of Magento that is a special time, and I don't think we can relive that.
Yeah. I think back in that time, I was doing eCommerce and Miva Merchant. Remember those?
Yeah, and there was a special transfer. There was a regular plugin you could get to do your eCommerce to Magento at the time.
Yeah.
So I started doing that. I was still kind of doing this side gig with the company, kind of making different things, and the owner was super open for having me make an extension. So they had a need for adding a product to the cart after you've purchased in a completely free product. So I called it Cardex, and that would add a product to the cart automatically after you've purchased something. So that was my one and only extension that I built for Magento that people actually paid for. And I remember just making it more and more complicated as time went on, that eventually I had to stop doing it. So at some point, I got invited to the Magento headquarters, and with a bunch of other people from the community. And I met Bob Schwartz, who was the president of Magento at the time. And, on the side, he said, "Hey, Brent, you should give up this single developer gig and just go off and do the agency gig." So on the behest of Bob Schwartz, I started Wajento, and I think that was like 2010. We incorporated and had our first employee shortly after, and have been, I think we became an actual Magento partner in 2011, and it was, going full bore since then. And I sold it in 2021. Yeah. When I sold it, we had about 64 employees. We had full contingency in Mexico. That was our fastest growing region, as well as a really, really good office in India, where Vijay Galani, who's now on the board, was our head there. And it was such a great time to be in the Magento world.
Yeah. Over the course of that time period, you obviously saw it get acquired twice, right?
Yep.
And then Magento 1 to 2. So you went through all of that. You're obviously keeping tabs on the entire ecosystem now, right? Even though you're no longer the owner of Wajento, you're the CEO of Content Cucumber, so you're doing content. But how else are you keeping yourself busy right now?
So I'm on the membership committee. I'm theoretically sort of I help with the marketing, although I'm living most of my life now in Hawaii, and everybody on the marketing committee is in the UK or in Europe. So the time zone has been a very big challenge, but I do manage to get to the majority of all the membership community calls. So I'm still very much entrenched in those. I'm still very interested in, my new company, the company that we purchased, Content Cucumber, is involved in writing content for e-commerce primarily. So in that sense, we're still involved in that world of e-commerce and how well commerce and content come together.
So content and commerce, I guess that kind of gets into AI. Might as well just get it out of the way, right? You're obviously well aware how AI is impacting everything. There's a lot of talk about agentic e-commerce, for whatever that's worth. What are you seeing, like, within your, view, current state of AI, hype versus reality, future state of AI in our ecosystem?
Yeah. So, when I left Wajento in 2023, I started a company called Content Basis, which I'm still running, and we worked on creating AI models that would generate content for clients that would be human. And the goal there is that you'd have an actual human who read it before you deliver it to the client. I think the biggest problem we're having right now is the clients still think AI is magic, and it does require lots of editing. So as I've progressed through this, I realized that AI is better for the analytical portion of what we're doing instead of the generation portion. Mm-hmm. And I think the generative AI makes us lazy. And certainly I use it. I have a blog post or a article today that I created the image for it. And I think the image creation is really a fun part of things. And I use my own picture. So I can't sue myself for that. But I think that content creation on its own is going to get extremely bland, and we're going to know, and I can already recognize when companies are using AI to generate their content. There are definitely buzzwords. And in fact, Bob Schwartz last week called me out for a summary that I've done. And I think that it's very easy to summarize something and then repost it, right? And in that you miss your voice and you interject the voice of whatever model you're using. And since they're all using each other, they all sound exactly the same. And there's so many different things now that are coming out in AI generation that people are going to become more and more aware of content created by AI that has never been read by a human first.
Yeah. Have you heard this theory that, most of the quality content online has already been consumed by AI, and that they've already learned from the highest quality, most content, and that now it's basically like diminishing returns, and there's more sludge in the system, and actually that the LLMs might have kind of flatlined a little bit in terms of the quality of their output.
Yeah, I don't, if you're going to, I'm a believer of maybe using it for ideation and outlining. If you're going to use it for that, that's great. And then fill in with your own writing. That's a way to do it. And then you're still giving your voice. You're going to get some inspirations from ideas. And, you can also run down the rabbit trail of getting too many ideas, and through analytics and things like that. If you ask ChatGPT, give me a list of 10 things about a subject, it'll give you a list and say, is there anything I forgot? And then it'll say, here's another 10 things. And you say, great, is that a complete list? No, here's another 10 things. So you can easily end up just running down a rabbit trail of unbelievable amount of minute information that is just counterproductive into what you're trying to do. So there's a way to use it and a way not to use it. And I think to try to answer your question a little more succinctly, I do believe that humans being involved in the content part of it is always going to be important, and we're always going to get our best ideas and unique views from our own view. So because we're very multifaceted, and we put in a lot of our life experience into that, and you can't replicate that life experience, especially me being 27 years old, having all that time working since I was 2, that you can't replicate that in any AI model yet. Maybe someday you can feed your entire library into a model, but that's something that multifaceted thing that comes from a real human writing it, you can't replicate.
And I think also the models are kind of they're just it's they've learned through all the content or as much as they've consumed, and then the LLMs are really calculating what's the most plausible next response, what's the plausible next word. So it's a plausibility response often, and a lot of times what's most plausible is the most accurate, but a lot of times it isn't. And so when you get into like the marketplace of ideas and concepts, sometimes plausibility is not what you're going for. You're going for something that's like a little bit beyond plausible, maybe something that's new and fresh and creative or challenging. And I feel like that's where I'm seeing diminishing return. Like, well, the expectations were kind of blown out of the sky when they first came out with ChatGPT, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And so the expectations then just kind of increased beyond there. Well, like if we can do this now, what's it going to do in 3 or 4 or 5 years? And so, I guess what I'm saying is that it's kind of flatlined a little bit, but I think LLMs are only part of AI, which is going to hit everything. And I'm not saying AI is going away. I just think it's interesting in terms of what we're learning about the AI role and what we're learning about the human role. And that is changing as we go pretty quickly. And that we're starting to kind of gain value on the human side a little more. Now that we've kind of adapted to this technology, we're starting to use it more and more. I'm seeing more and more of the kind of what you're saying is that like you need to edit it. It needs to be your ideas. That's the most interesting content to begin with. So I don't know if that's been like your journey using these AI tools, or if you're kind of coming out with some similar experiences.
Yeah, the argument is that we're going to need less people, right? But I think we're going to need smart people. My son is a front-end developer on Magento, believe it or not, and he is using AI to help him. But without a person there, you do end up with a whole bunch of garbage spaghetti code. And he's very aware of what AI left unchecked will do to your code base. And it will oftentimes, well, number one, it doesn't have a memory, and I also use AI coding, and I know for a fact that Claude does not learn anything you're doing it, because I've started to have a log, a violation log that keeps track of all the times it does things that I tell it not to do, even though I explicitly in Claude.md say do this, never do this, or whatever. It still does it. So I think that without the human there in any aspect, we're never going to, you can't be guaranteed to have something that is human worthy. I think that the people that are saying that AI is going to take everybody's job away would be a solopreneur who's already worked by themselves, who doesn't need a team to do it. But I would argue that if you think that AI is going to handle everything on your marketing side and everything on your development side and everything on your HR side and everything on your technology side, man, that's a lot for one person to try to manage. Like, you have to manage all those different models and all those different agents within your AI thing, that we still need super smart people to handle the regular tasks that people handle. Like, it's not going to just, we're not going to have AI agents. We're not going to sit in our in our rooms and watch Judge Judy all day. And I don't know why I said Judge Judy, but it just came to mind as something we would do in the middle of the day. And Matt, no offense if that's what you normally watch.
It is my favorite show, but I wasn't going to say that.
Maybe Judge Wapner would be more of our generation. And then like the AI just does our work, right? We don't have to do anything. We just deploy these models that do nothing, that we manage on our behalf. I don't think that's ever going to happen. We're going to have the ability to, we'd have to manage them and all the other things. So I know I'm getting very long-winded, but I do believe that it's overrated the amount of things that a person can do by themselves. And there's going to be people that brag about it. There's going to be people that brag that they've made a Magento site in under a day and it looks fantastic and it has 27 fully coded, extensions in it. But having to manage that and doing it right is still going to be difficult.
Yeah, I agree. And there's kind of a common denominator that evolves out of the systems where if you're just only using AI to do your work, it's kind of a race to mediocrity, I think. Like you're not really setting yourself apart if you're just, using these tools unchecked. Obviously the prompting's important, but also like, I think you have to build a thesis around what you're trying to say, and you've got to take, if it's content, I think it also is true about, building code. I'm not a hardcore coder by any sense, but I think that AI still makes a lot of mistakes, and kind of the intent sometimes isn't clear, so it'll just spit out whatever it thinks you want, and then you've got to go back and be like, no, that's not exactly what I wanted. In terms of how it's impacting e-commerce, I think, there's a future state that people are talking about where I'm on my phone and I'm a buyer. Let's say I'm a contractor and I say, okay, I've got a job site. I'm doing the plumbing. We're building 5 showers, 3 faucets, a washing machine, and we need 200 feet of plumbing pipe and the connectors, blah, 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 blah. Find the best deal for me and get it to this job site. Go. And then an AI is just going to list off your options. We've started to see this in Perplexity, by the way. But in terms of the merchant side, like, is this the future of commerce? Are people going to be talking to their devices and having them do the work, their agents essentially? And what does that mean for the merchants, and how do the merchants adapt their business models to meet, essentially what the new buyers want, and how they want to order stuff?
That's such a great question. And I'll just say that today is July 30th, a recording. I wrote my today's article about agentic commerce on LinkedIn, and I read a weekly post, a weekly article and newsletter that comes out every Wednesday on LinkedIn. And today's was about that. And I'll fully admit that last year I thought agentic was just this buzzword that nobody was going to use. And when I went to ETL this spring, everybody had agentic, where everything was doing agentic. And last year I kept saying, people write content for websites because people buy stuff on websites. I don't believe it's going to be the case anymore. We are going to have now websites that are fully functioning, especially specifically for what you just talked about, where you have a bot that goes out, shops on the site, comes back and says, hey, I found this on XYZ. It's going to be $20. Would you like to buy it? And they're going to be, it is going to be something that goes out and scrapes, and you're going to have your own regular sites, and there's going to be ways for you to control it. And I think the really interesting play there is B2B agents that are going to have to be logged in and authenticated. So you're going to go out to over to Jimmy's Widgets that sells lugs for big pipes and stuff, and that your agent's going to go out and I need to get more metal for my lugs, and it's going to then shop around the best place to find metal, and it's going to be a buying interaction between a couple of bots, and there may be an approval process on both sides by a human to make sure that we want to buy it, but there more likely will be like a rate limiter that says, hey, if you find it with this range, it's gonna happen. And if we look back in time, we know that on the stock market, they used to yell and scream on a floor with pieces of paper, and that's how you traded stock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, they moved to an electronic trading system. And I'm in Minneapolis. There was a grain exchange, just like there was a floor, just like in New York and Chicago, that had a big board that had all the things, and there was a trading floor, and that was literally how people did it. And if you watch Wall Street or one of those older 1980s shows, you'll see how it actually worked. But it went to electronic trading, and I believe that we're going to have a lot of electronic purchasing coming up, where you have the same type of thing, the same type of bot that goes out and buys that stock for you is going to go and buy a widget for you.
Yeah, your plumbing parts or whatever. And on the merchant side, the supply, you're going to have a private portal to buy and get your wholesale pricing or your negotiated pricing. The buyer's agent's going to have access to that portal, right? So you're going to train the agent to log in. That buyer might have 4 or 5 different suppliers that they're comparing prices to. So in terms of preparation for this, right? If this is an inevitability, what kind of work do you think needs to happen on both the buyer side to get that kind of level of automation and on the merchant side as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all going to be around your API endpoints and how you are able to interact with whatever thing is coming in to ask for a price. And I think it's going to be the same as what you see on the stock market, where it's sort of a bidding type of thing. There might just be flat pricing depending on the volume, but it does give us an opportunity. It gives merchants also an opportunity to raise the price if there's a lot of demand. I think that the idea of having better APIs and better, more robust APIs that are specifically for what you're talking about in agentic purchasing, and then agentic procurement where you're selling, is going to be the thing that we're going to see in the future.
Okay, so let's tie this back to Magento. Let's see if we can connect the dots here on what we've been talking about. If this is the future of B2B commerce, one part of the future of B2B commerce, where is the relevance in an open source platform like Magento within this ecosystem?
Well, we know Magento is already the foundation for Adobe Commerce. So we know that it powers really, really big companies. And now what Adobe targets are really, really, really big companies. And I think that was 3 reallys, or it might be 4. They might be going to 4 reallys pretty soon. But it also means that anybody in our community can build anything they want for this. So we are positioned not to wait for Adobe to do something, because they're not. I should just interject that in 2018, Adobe announced Sensei, which is an AI tool that helps you with your rules and product pricing and different things within the site. So this is not new to Adobe. They just don't seem to really push on the feature part of it. There are going to be parts of the Adobe puzzle that fit into the Adobe Commerce SaaS platform and maybe Adobe Commerce Pass. But everything else that we're talking about today is or already has been built by community members that are out there actively working on all these things that you can do. And the best part about this is you can build anything you want without any guardrails. You don't have to go get any approval from any AFIs. You don't have to go to Spotify or another company that sounds just like Spotify to get an approval to say, hey, can I push this API to you? No, you can do whatever you want. You can sell whatever you want, and you can create whatever you want. And then that creation get tied directly into your code, or you can create a SaaS piece that also connects to the code in Magento. So that you have all kinds of fantastic options that help you to build things that you want. And I will say the other Audifys of the world aren't building a lot of built-in AI yet. I'll say yet, because it's coming. And maybe Shopware is a little bit ahead of the game in building AI into their platform, but those other platforms are not as fast thinking as you would think they should be. I think Magento is perfectly situated in MageOS, if you want to talk about that, or the Magento Open Source community, and having an extension that'll work within that. I believe maybe Hufa and Hufa Commerce are going to be a big driver in out-of-the-box features that will allow us to launch something quickly and efficiently. And I know that I personally, on stage live at a Magento Live event in 2015, launched a site in under 60 minutes, and we sold things live to an audience with a custom theme.
Yeah, I guess we could dig into some of the myths of open source and Magento in a second, though, because I want to get back to, let's just say you hit a phase where technology evolution and adoption is going to go fast. Like something's changed. Something in the marketplace has changed, and now everybody needs to be doing this quickly. Or people that are, might hit your category of business or your type of business. Like, how do you see open source as a community that's capable to react versus other options?
Well, let's go back to the Hufa model of a community that is capable to react. Well, actually, we have a couple of things we can talk about here. We have the whole MageOS thing, which is a reaction to the fact that Adobe's not doing anything with their code base anymore, and they've been neglecting the community, and they neglected the community for a while there, right? And that's exactly why MageOS happened. There was an open letter that was published maybe in 2020 or 2021 or something like that. So that's a great example of the community reacting. Then building Hufa and what Willem Wiggins and Vinay and the team have done to make something brand new on top of a platform that is now about 10 years old. And by the way, Shopify is 20 some years old, so it's not new. It's nothing is special about that, right? Nobody's going to say this is an old thing, because Shopify is an old thing. As soon as, let's get that out of the way. That they pivoted, they were able to come up with something that made the very, 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 that's 7 slows on Magento and Luma to extremely fast and hitting 100s, like 99 and 100 on the Lighthouse scores. Like, they focused specifically on a problem, and that problem was speed. And the problem in speed in Magento was that anything out of the box was super slow. Even the lazy agencies out there that built stuff on top of Luma, they'd launch it and it would load in 11 seconds. That doesn't happen anymore. Now we have sites that come out of the box live, and they're under 1 second. They're 0.5 milliseconds or whatever that fast number is. So I think that's a great example of how the community has reacted quickly and efficiently to what's happened, and they've built a great business out of this as well.
Mm-hmm. I think I did an analysis once. It was like, okay, what you take all the community of developers, open source developers, Magento developers, you add up that number. And then you take up the number of people that have actual access to the source code for a closed system. A lot of times if you look at that in terms of engineering power and manpower and like programmer power, the open source community dramatically outperforms. There's just more resources. So let's say, this is kind of my take, but if you have to build something quickly that's robust, first of all, you don't have to wait for permission, like you were saying. You do it right away. But there's a lot of people. Like, if there's a need, there's a lot of people willing to jump in and get involved. And I find that fascinating, and also part of what's durable about open source. But I also like that it's kind of rebellious. There's kind of like, no, we're not going to answer to anybody. Like, we're doing this together. We're doing this as a community, but there is no ultimate, power broker that's defining what it is we can and can't do. The community decides, which I love that aspect.
Yeah, I think if you look at what's been done, and even in the past, multi-store inventory was one of those community-driven features inside of Magento that happened before the purchase. Some would argue it wasn't as successful as it could have been, but it was. When Magento opened up GitHub and allowed for PRs and things like that, that was a huge step. And I think that managed well, that could really, and I will add on too that they offered some recognition to people that committed the most to the repository. So you did see large groups of people squashing bugs and helping to fix things. I know one of the things that a SaaS model might say is they look at all the bugs in Magento. We don't see the bugs in SaaS models. We don't see the issues that are happening in behind because it's private, right? They're not going to publish that, especially if it's a public company. Like this is private things that are happening that we don't need to know about. But we know we know that those things happen, right? We know that people have issues logging into something on a SaaS platform and there's a bug, and then sometimes it takes a while to resolve that bug. But with Magento, it's public, and it's because it's open source and because they use GitHub as a public repository to register those bugs. Everybody sees it, and they say for whatever reason they think, hey, this is something that is concerning, but it's actually not. It's the opposite.
Yeah. So one of the other myths is that, and you kind of touched on this, open source is more expensive and slower to build on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess more expensive. I would argue because normally open source is free, so that the free part, it makes it exponentially cheaper than even $29 a month. So then you would say, well, then you got to host it somewhere. I think that is it Ivan Chernobyl? I always butcher his name. He has put out like 200 stores on 200 domains with 2,000 or 10,000 products, all on a super micro instance of on AWS. That he's shown that you can make Magento performant on very little hardware. And my experience now has been that I've seen Magento become extremely stable and extremely performant, and whether that's PHP or the underlying architecture of servers that have gotten just faster and cheaper, but they perform extremely well and cost hardly anything. So if you think about if you're on a SaaS platform and you're doing $10 million in sales, your GMV cost to that provider is probably going to be around 2% of that. I know that Shopify starts at $2,400 a month. So think about the amount of servers you get for $2,500 a month, even if they're bare metal. You're not going to need to spend that much money, especially now we can use cloud that works. And then the licensing is zero, so all you have is development. So if you're into this whole I can do everything by myself, I think the agentic programming, the vibe coding now has changed that whole thing completely. No longer do you have the expensive developer who you have to have around to try to upgrade or whatever. No longer do you have those things. The other thing that I'll add on to that is that Magento now, or Adobe now, has stopped putting any new features in Magento. And that absolutely guarantees you that you're not going to override another feature on an upgrade. Like the only thing the upgrades are there for is to work with newer versions of PHP and fix any security holes that may have been there. And if there are any performance improvements they can get within the code and making code better, that's all they're going to do. They're not going to do anything else. They haven't even announced any new API endpoints within the Magento system or within the Adobe Commerce system. The biggest thing they've done is come out with Adobe SaaS, which is sort of like a black box now. We know it's Magento, but it's a closed down version of it. And none of the extensions that are on the marketplace work in it. You have to go to the Adobe marketplace. But having said that, it makes upgrading extremely, it makes it easier than it was in the past. You don't have a bunch of new features that are getting rolled in that will maybe conflict against the module that you have. All those things are now fairly easy to do. And I hate to use the word easy, but it's a lot easier than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Straightforward. That's what we like to say. Not easy, but clear, I guess, or whatever. But yeah, I get your point. And then, time. So, this I'll just use an example. My son, while he was in high school, came home from spring break and built a Shopify store without any experience and started selling socks. So people are like, well, how can Magento do that?
Yeah, so I think that the challenge really there is you can go to a provider, and in the case we did it 10 years ago was with Nexus. They just had a starter program, so you could launch a site, and then you could just modify the existing theme with colors. The challenge now is that you need to introduce a theme if you want to have some special thing or special look and feel in there. So I would say maybe the fastest way then would be to go with an open source theme that's built into Magento OS, which I think we're going to see more of. And you're going to go to a hosting provider that gives you a one-click launch, just like it is for WordPress. And you'll be able to launch a site with a theme that has all the bugs that Shopify has, all the buzzes and whistles. What did I meant to say?
Bells
there?
and whistles.
Bells and whistles. Why did I say bugs and whistles? All the different things that Shopify has, all the bugs that Shopify has, but just bells. And you'll be able to launch it and modify it. I mean, there's already Magento themes that do that. But there'll be if that's a requirement, if you need to get something done and you want to run it for super cheap, for $29 a month, maybe Shopify is your best bet. Maybe that's if your goal is to spend $29 a month on your e-commerce site, maybe Magento is not your best bet. And it's a great topic too, because I rail on the Shopify people for saying they're the fit for everything. We don't need anything else, right? We don't need any other platform in the world. All we need is Shopify. That's like saying all we need is Hyundai's. And we don't need any other car in the world except for Hyundai's, because they get us from A to B, and they have all different ranges. They even have a Genesis fancy model. Maybe I don't want a Hyundai, or maybe it doesn't fit what I want to do. I think that there's diversity in all of what we're doing because there's competition, and competition makes better products. And if the people who are so zealous about Shopify believe that Shopify fits everybody's need, then we're going to end up with a mediocre product.
Yeah, nobody wins when there's a monopoly situation, except for the monopoly. Competition's good, obviously. I think that the e-commerce space is going to shake out with, at the very least, 3 primary players, and there'll probably be more like, half a dozen. And there'll be emerging ones. I think there's e-commerce players we don't even know about yet. But back to Magento Association, I think, I've been trying to kind of hammer on this idea of durability, like durability of platform, durability of community. There's something tried and true, I think, that is worth considering, but there's also like the evolutionary component to it. Like to me, the open source has fewer trade-offs in the sense that, particularly with Magento, you get something that's been around for 20 years. And then it also is evolving at the same time, but it's also evolving organically, and it's not evolving to some corporation's business needs and requirements and profit incentives. It's evolving based on the needs of the community that's using it and developing it. And I think those two things are kind of what makes it so strong. It evolves organically. It's got durability. It's affordable. And like you said, it's the it's found some stability, where I think one of the criticisms was before, rightly, I'd say in some instances, that it was buggy, and that, let's just say, the 1 to 2 path wasn't super smooth. And I think it lost a lot of credibility during that, and I think rightfully so. But what we've noticed, just because, I have an agency too, a Magento agency, is that we've been staying version current. The versions are stable. And, for the most part, we have some clients that can't stay current for other reasons because of customizations, et cetera. But, it's just really humming. And by the way, fast as hell. I mean, our sites are fast, not to, preach, but like, I feel like we have to address some of the myths that are out there that people are making these claims falsely against Magento. And I feel like, well, we got to at least defend ourselves here. I don't think these claims are honest or real. I don't think they're thoughtful, and I don't think they're basically informed. These myths are just myths that marketing departments are coming out with. So, I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm sure you have a few things to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, going from Magento 1 to Magento 2, it was a perfect storm for Shopify, where Shopify was really ramping up their marketing, and they are the best marketing e-commerce tool, as well as the best payment gateway marketing in payment retrieval tool of making money only off of payments of any e-commerce platform on the planet. They made it, their marketing was so perfect. They came out saying it was so simple, and it is simple. It's simple to get up and running and simple to use. So it's a perfect storm of going from Magento 1 to Magento 2, which was hurried and arguably very buggy in the very beginning. And then Shopify coming along, making it super easy. So the divergence started then. But we can't go back. We have now two mature platforms. We have more than two, but we have these two that were competing against each other. But the myth still comes from that community that is hammering on how bad Magento is. And I would argue the opposite, that Magento is now growing and becoming better and more diverse, rather than the opposite, and that the community is holding this together. That the community is the one that are driving the innovations, and the community that is the one that are giving pressure to leadership at Adobe to make sure that they're not forgetting about what's happening in the community. Mm-hmm. And I think the ultimate thing that would happen there is that Magento OS would split off on its own, it's actually now its own entity. But right now it's a fork that's parity, that we'd start seeing a divergence in that fork. And I think the first thing we're going to see is maybe some of these new AI things are going to there'll be a release that will be, there'll be a branch of Magento OS that is a new version of it that maybe gets it'll get the basic stuff rolled in for security patches, but we're going to see more and more built-in features in part of that to help people. And then who knows, maybe someday Adobe was going to wake up and say, hey, this feature's pretty good. Maybe we'll roll that into our commercial version of it. I think that at the end of the day, all of what you're talking about, everybody has a commercial thing in mind. Nobody makes a website just to have a website. I think that Magento is there to try to sell things. And people have used it for catalogs, but it really does, the best thing it does is sell things. Mm-hmm. So from that standpoint, it's very well positioned to really work quickly in what you were talking about earlier, and working with AI and agentic agents, and making sure that we have endpoints that meet what the demand. And maybe that would be another thing that would happen, where somebody is making the AI, the headless part of Magento, work well with an agent that doesn't need UX.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking in terms of like sovereignty and independence and owning your data and owning your technology. Like, there's businesses out there that make a lot of money selling to 40 other businesses. And let's say those 40 businesses want to connect into their e-commerce systems in a way where they can automate the order flow. Why would you want to not own that technology, particularly if no one needs to see what that data is? No one needs to see the revenue that's coming through there, particularly not another technology company. So if you're doing, hundreds of millions of dollars in transaction through B2B with 20 other companies, and you've created automated flows and agentic, e-commerce, I would say you want to own that, and you want to own the data and the technology. You want to have independence and autonomy in your technology. That's what makes you valuable. That's the foundation of your house. That is the thing that you own. people think about real estate and businesses and structures and land and hardware and factories. And it's like, this is what, this is the equity I've built. But there's also this idea of the equity that you've built is the people, the processes, and the technology that you have in your business, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that that when Magento 1, when the enterprise version was sunsetted, just like the pro version, you had an opportunity as a merchant to buy out that code. So you would then take full responsibility. I think the last version was 1.14 or something like that on enterprise. And you could then just run it. And I can guarantee there's people out there, there's people still running old versions of Magento 1, and there's a whole ecosystem around that. And there's people that don't want to move because they don't need to, and they weren't scared away by the PayPal threats that happened when they were being forced to move into Magento 2. So you bring up a great point that you can't do that with any SaaS platform where they say, oh, here, we'll just sell you the code. They only do that if they sunset the whole platform, that you can buy that out, or they give it to you. But that's very unique that you would, and like there's probably people are running on OS Commerce, right? So it does give you that longevity and guaranteedness in the fact that you're going to be running into the future, no matter what happens.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of businesses running back office proprietary systems that that don't look like anything else. They built them from scratch and they still work. And you might argue, well, there's a lot of tech debt there, and they're like, yeah, we've also made a lot of money and in the process. And when we're ready to evolve to something else, we'll plan that out. But I don't know. So me kind of not to make this interview about me, but I see there being a kind of point at which businesses start to worry about, where is my data? Who owns my data? Who owns the technology I'm running this business on? And do I have autonomy in this situation? Or could I actually be taken advantage of because I didn't build sovereignty into my thinking when I invested?
Yeah, it's a great point too. The fact that you don't actually own that underlying code, and that data is also being used to help your competitors is another part of that. That the bigger you are, the more you get taxed for using that software, both in cost and in the fact that data is being used to make your competitors' sites better, right? All that data is getting used, so it's being used to help your competitors.
Yeah. And on another note, just on that same thing, OpenAI is not open. So just for anyone thinking it is. There's another AI system that was made in China, ironically, which is open source. But that's a topic for another day. But I'll just, I'll leave that out there.
Yeah. Llama is open source.
Yeah.
If you want to use Facebook's AI.
Yeah. I know, and I think there's going to be a lot of movement in that whole space. I think that I was saying something today, this morning at a tech council for Connecticut, and I equated to where we're at with AI today as like this is the AOL version of the internet. We're that young. We don't know what's going to happen. Let's just I don't think we know. I think we can speculate, but I think things are going to change really fast, and it's going to be really exciting. I just think businesses need to be aware, and you got to get your partners, get your community together, get your consultants or whoever you trust. Have those conversations. Keep your eyes and ears open. Be open-minded. Right.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Brent. This was awesome. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I appreciate what you've done for the open source community. And anything you want to leave us with? Words of wisdom, pearls.
I mean, I think you should join Magento Association. There's right now voting on new board elections, and that there's going to be a new board member coming on. And the only way you can vote is to join and be a member. So join the Magento Association. There's so many new fun things that are coming out that you'll have benefits from. Attend a Meet Magento conference. There's Meet Magento conferences happening all over the world. Canada was just announced. The Philippines are happening soon. It's something very unique in our community, that this old dead platform, and I'm in the podcast version, I'm doing air quotes right now. So Matt, make sure that you describe that I'm using air quotes.
Brent's doing air quotes right now, guys.
Thank you. That this is such a vibrant community that there's new Meet Magentos being announced all the time, all over the world, not
all
just
over the world.
Yeah. And by the way, you can sell with using Magento in every single country in the world. There's no restrictions. You can be in any country and use Magento, good or bad, but there's no, and you can sell anything you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could sell all the hair on my head.
Yeah, you and me both. All right, Brent, thank you so much. For those listening and watching, thank you for participating. Join the Magento Association. Follow us on social media. Follow us on LinkedIn. Follow us on YouTube, where you get your podcast. We appreciate you listening. If you know someone you think would be amazing to have on the podcast, reach out, and we'll catch you the next time.